It was always the silence that haunted her most. Not the empty room, not the unopened toys in his old bedroom, not even the missing posters, long since faded by time and rain. No, for Eleanor Gray, the silence was the worst part. The world hadn't just taken her son. It had taken his voice, his laughter, his small footsteps echoing down the hallway after bath time, and it had taken it without warning. 25 years. 25. It should have gotten easier by now, but grief doesn't. Wear down like stone in a river, it hardens. Turns into something sharp, something jagged, buried under the skin. She carried it every day, tucked behind her ribs like a blade she dared not pull out. She had tried everything: therapy, prayer, confrontation, pleas to the police, pleas to God. Nothing brought back Matthew. Nothing brought back any of them. 22 children, one teacher, one sealed classroom. Gone. She remembered it too well. It was April 3rd, 2000. A Monday. She had kissed Matthew on the forehead that morning. He wore his new sneakers, the ones he'd begged her to buy. He said he had a big spelling test and promised her he'd ace it. He was confident like that, smiled like his father, had the same crooked grin. And he never came home. By 3:30 that afternoon, the school was in chaos. Eleanor remembered the screaming, the sirens, the frantic parents, but what chilled her wasn't the confusion. It was the cold fact the teacher's lounge delivered just hours later. The classroom was locked from the inside. No broken windows, no forced entry, no sounds. The security cameras, newly installed and proudly non-functional that week, caught nothing. Every single student in Mr. Halloway's third-grade class had vanished. The teacher, too. No trace, not a smear of blood, not a footprint, not a dropped pencil. Authorities dragged the school apart. They found nothing. Rumors spread quickly. Some blamed a gas leak, a sinkhole, a hidden door. Some said cult. Others whispered of something worse, something unnatural. But eventually, like all horror that becomes too big to hold, the town let it die. They fenced off Willow Creek Elementary, locked it, left it, and warned kids to stay far away. But Eleanor came back every year, on the anniversary, same time, same place, same ritual. She stood at the gates, stared through the chain link and whispered, "I'm still looking, Matt." This year, though, something shifted. It started with a box. She had gone up to the attic just after Christmas. She told herself it was time to clear out the old things, donate, throw away, cleanse, whatever people called it when they were tired of drowning in their own memories. The box was labeled Matthew Grade 3. She hadn't touched it since the week he disappeared. Inside were dusty workbooks, a red binder, some doodles, and a few photographs. Her hand trembled when she picked up one of them. It was of Matthew at his desk, grinning, his hand in the air. Behind him was a blurry chalkboard and something strange she'd never noticed before. A faint circle with what looked like triangles scratched into the board. It didn't look like a child's drawing. It looked older. Then she found it. Tucked inside a library book was a folded piece of paper, wide-ruled, yellowing at the edges. In Matthew's writing, but the strokes were uneven, hurried. "Don't trust the teacher. He's not real. If we go in again, we won't come out." Her breath vanished. The date on the corner, March 31st, 2000, 3 days before they disappeared. She sat on the attic floor for nearly an hour, heart pounding like a war drum. She read the note again and again. He's not real. What did that mean? Not who he said he was. A stranger posing as a teacher, or something else. And if we go in again? Again? Had something happened before the disappearance, on something nobody knew about? The next day she returned to the police with the note. The detective she spoke to was younger than the case. He read it, shrugged, and said, "Probably just kids playing around. You know how imaginations run wild." Eleanor didn't argue, but inside she burned. She hadn't spent 25 years surviving just to be brushed off. The note meant something, and that meant one thing: it was time to go back. Willow Creek Elementary was still there, rotting quietly on the edge of town. The school board had promised to tear it down, but never followed through. Maybe superstition kept them away, maybe it was money. Either way, the building stood like a tombstone, waiting for someone to remember the dead buried under its silence. Eleanor came prepared this time. Gloves, a flashlight, bolt cutters. She waited until dark, snuck through the trees like she used to when Matthew was little, and they played hide-and-seek around the soccer field. The fence was easy, a snip of the cutters, a quick step through. The school smelled like mildew and rust. Her flashlight cast narrow slices through the dust, revealing peeling posters and cracked tiles. Then she saw it, room 3B. The door was sealed. A padlock hung from the handle, crusted with rust. She hesitated, breath caught in her throat, and then she cut it. The door creaked open. Her light swept across the room. Desks, untouched, chalkboard, still bearing faint scribbles. But what made her freeze wasn't the furniture, it was the wall. A symbol had been drawn across the back panel, a circle intersected with triangles, and a single eye staring from the center. She knew it. It was the same thing from the photo, but now it was clearer, bolder, as if it had been redrawn. She stepped forward. The room was colder than the hallway. Her light flickered. She smacked it, and when it came back on, she gasped. On each desk was a piece of paper, and on each paper, a child's drawing, stick figures, circles, red scribbles, all of them showing the same thing, a figure in black with a face like melting wax and a jagged smile. In every drawing it stood at the front of the classroom, its hands stretched wide, its eyes hollow. She reached for the one at Matthew's desk. The name Matthew Gray was scrawled in the corner. Beneath it, in tiny letters written in red crayon, "He watches us even when the door is closed." And then she heard it, a creak, behind her. She turned fast, but the hallway was empty. Only, it didn't feel empty. She stood frozen, heart hammering, breath sharp and quick. And then a whisper tickled the back of her ear. A child's voice. One word. "Mom." She spun around so fast that the flashlight flew from her hand and clattered to the floor, its beam skittering across the cracked tiles like a broken lighthouse. "Matthew." Her voice cracked out of her, a dry, choked whisper, too brittle to carry far silence. But that whisper, it had been real, right against her ear, not in her mind, not imagined. It had the softness only a child's voice could carry, laced with a sorrow that sliced her deeper than any blade ever could. She scrambled to pick up the flashlight. Her hands were trembling, too unsteady to hold it steady. The beam quivered as it scanned the room again, still empty, still desks, still drawings, still that symbol. She backed toward the hallway step by step, not daring to turn her back on the room. Something was wrong with it. Not just old or haunted or steeped in memories. It felt wrong on a level she couldn't name. Like the walls had been watching her. Once in the hallway, she ran. Her footsteps echoed too loudly, like the school was mocking her with the sound of her own fear. She turned corners she barely remembered, pushing open a supply room door and sliding inside, slamming it shut behind her. Only then did she allow herself to breathe again. She slumped to the floor. Her hands were ice cold, her cheeks flushed with panic. What the hell was that voice? She tried to explain it away. Old memories surfacing. Imagination triggered by the note, the drawing, the setting. But no, she hadn't imagined it. The warmth of breath, the clarity of the voice. It had said Mom. Matthew's voice hadn't changed in 25 years in her memory. She could still hear it echoing in her bones. And what she'd just heard, it had been his. She looked around the supply room, which was cluttered with old chairs, deflated balls, crates of unopened paper, and a door, one she didn't remember, smaller than the rest. Not a normal size, not even child-sized, more like a service hatch. About 4 feet tall, rusted at the hinges, no markings, and somehow locked from the inside. She stared at it, frozen in thought. Had that always been there? She stood and stepped forward, pressing her ear to the metal. Silence, and then the faintest sound. A scrape, like something soft dragging across concrete, followed by whispering. Not one voice, many. Layered, indistinct. Children. The sound fluttered in and out like static, but one thing was clear. It was coming from behind the door. She reached out and touched the handle. It was freezing. She tried to twist it, but it didn't move. Something inside her screamed to leave, but something deeper, something older, more desperate, told her not to. This was why she had come. She stepped back, gritted her teeth, and kicked the latch with her boot. Once, twice. The third time it gave way with a groan and fell open with a burst of stale air that smelled like damp earth and rot. A tunnel, narrow, cramped, walls made of old brick and pipes running along the top like veins. Her flashlight barely reached the end of the corridor. It stretched downward, then curved out of sight. She swallowed hard and stepped inside. The tunnel was too small to walk upright. She crouched, knees aching, one hand on the wall for balance, the other holding the light. It was colder in here, a dead sort of cold that didn't belong underground. As she moved, the whispers grew clearer. Snippets now, pieces of sentences, children's voices. He said not to tell. I want my mom. The lights are wrong. It's not Mr. Halloway. Every step she took felt like she was peeling back reality itself. The further she went, the more detached the world above began to feel, like she was sliding into a memory that didn't belong to her, or maybe into someone else's nightmare. Then the tunnel ended. She came out into a low, wide room made of concrete. The floor was damp, littered with toys, old notebooks, school bags, 25-year-old relics lying in neat little piles like offerings. And on the far wall, drawn in red, not chalk this time, was the same symbol. But this time it moved. Eleanor gasped and dropped the flashlight. The symbol pulsed in a slow, throbbing glow like a heartbeat, and from it, strands of shadow stretched out like arms, curling into the room, reaching toward the toys and bags like a parent laying claim to its children. And in the center of the room, facing away from her, stood a man, or something shaped like one. He wore a teacher's suit, old and dusty, and his hands were clasped behind his back. His hair was slicked, his stance perfectly straight, but everything about him was off, too still, too smooth. Like someone pretending to be human and missing the mark entirely. Eleanor didn't breathe, couldn't. Then he spoke. You're late, Eleanor. His voice was smooth, calm, familiar. She felt her knees buckle. Mr. Halloway, she choked. Out. He turned slowly, and she screamed. His face was wrong, like it had been molded in wax and then left too close to heat. The eyes were in the right place, but they were empty, black voids that didn't reflect light. His mouth was wide, and far too straight, a grotesque parody of a smile, and still so still for she recognized him. He looked just like the old photos of the teacher from her son's class, but he wasn't. Why are you here? He asked. She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up, her lungs forgotten how to function. You were told not to come back, just like the others. She shook her head. Where's Matthew? Where are the children? The creature smiled wider. They're where I put them, safe, unlike this place. She took a trembling step forward. They're alive? That thing tilted its head. Depends how you define alive. No, she whispered. No, no, no. I kept them, he said. They were mine. You people gave them to me every day. Every morning you sent them into my room like offerings, and I fed on what they gave me, fear, innocence, belief. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But he fought me, it continued. Your son, he saw me. He remembered what I looked like when I wasn't wearing this suit, and he tried to warn them. Brave, that one. I liked him. Where is he? She begged. The shadows around the room shivered. The wall behind him rippled like a puddle of ink. He's close, the creature said. But he's changing, they all are. When you wear someone's face long enough, you forget the one you started with. No, Eleanor sobbed, backing away. I'm taking him back. I'll burn this. Whole place down if I have to. The thing blinked, slowly, deliberately, and then, you're welcome to try. The light behind him exploded, and 22 shadows stepped forward. Children, all staring, none blinking, all with the same hollow eyes. Eleanor stumbled backward, her legs turning to water as the 22 figures stepped into the pale light. They were children, or at least they had been, but now, oh God, now they moved like marionettes strung together by something that didn't understand how bones were meant to work. Limbs jerked slightly wrong, heads tilted at impossible angles. Their faces were pale, stretched thin as if they had been drained of something vital. But it was their eyes that broke her, those hollow, bottomless pits that didn't reflect light, just like the thing that had called itself Mr. Halloway. "Matthew," she whispered, scanning every face, desperate for one that looked familiar. "Matt, please, baby, are you here?" None of them answered. None blinked. They just stared. Behind them, the not Halloway creature stepped aside, clasping its hands like a proud host unveiling a gallery. "Do you see now? They're with me. They've been with me since that morning. 25 years, Eleanor, not 1 minute older, not 1 second gone." She choked on the air. "You froze them?" "In a sense," he said, walking slowly, in a half circle around the children. "I preserved them. Because here in this place, time doesn't quite behave the same. Here they're mine, unspoiled by adulthood, untouched by cynicism, their beliefs still intact. Delicious." A soft sob tore from Eleanor's chest. She clutched the wall for balance, bile rising in her throat. Why? Why children? The thing looked at her, amused. Because they see things. Things adults train themselves to forget. They still feel wonder, Eleanor, and fear. Such pure fear. A small figure stepped closer, a girl with tangled blonde hair and mismatched shoes. Her face looked oddly familiar. Eleanor remembered her from an old missing poster, Anna Fisher, the quiet girl who loved butterflies. Anna's lips moved, a whisper. "Run." Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at her. "What did you say?" The other children didn't move. But Anna's lips parted again, barely audible. "Run now, before he—" She didn't finish. The creature's smile snapped shut. Enough of that. Anna's body stiffened. Her back arched unnaturally, her mouth locked open as if an invisible hand had yanked her jaw wide. "No!" Eleanor screamed. "Let her go!" The creature turned toward her slowly. "You're starting to spoil the mood." Eleanor stepped back again, reaching into her coat pocket, her fingers fumbling for the only thing she had left, the crumpled note. Matthew's note. She pulled it out, unfolding it with shaking hands. The moment the paper touched the air, the children froze. All of them. Their heads tilted in unison, their mouths parted just slightly, and something shimmered in the room. The creature's face twitched. "What is that?" "You know damn well what this is," she said, holding the note out in front of her like a weapon. "Matthew saw you. He wrote this before you took him." The thing's smile twisted. That was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to remember. But he did. He remembered enough to write this. "He," warned the others. The creature took one step forward, and the air in the room thickened, pressing down on her chest. "I tried to be merciful," he said, "but I see now you won't leave quietly." He reached toward her, fingers elongating, stretching like shadows on water. She ran, bolted out of the chamber, back through the tunnel. She didn't care that the air was thick and foul, that her knees scraped the floor with every lunge forward. Her only thought, get out, get out, get out. Behind her, the whispers returned, but they were louder now, angry, warped, and they followed. Her? She burst back into the supply room, lungs burning, eyes wide. The door she'd kicked in earlier swung open wider, as if something had knocked it from the other side. She didn't stop. Through the hallway, past room 3B, down the corridor, and back toward the old boiler room window. But the building, oh God, it was changing. The hallways twisted, stretched longer. Doors she passed seemed to multiply, and the light from her flashlight grew dimmer with each turn. The air had a pulse now, like the school was alive, watching, shifting to trap her. No, no, no. She turned a corner, and there it was, the window, open. She lunged for it, scrambled through the narrow space, and collapsed onto the cold grass outside. The night air hit her like a slap. It was raining now, cold, sharp droplets that stung her skin and grounded her just enough to start moving again. She didn't look back. Didn't stop until she reached her car, flung herself inside and locked the doors. Her hands were still clutching Matthew's note. It was damp now, stained from sweat and tears, but still legible, still real. She drove. Fast? Didn't care about speed limits or red lights. She didn't breathe properly until she was halfway home. When she finally collapsed into her kitchen chair, the adrenaline crashed. Her body felt heavy, shaking, her mind still buzzing with what she'd seen, what she couldn't unsee. She sat there for hours. When the sun rose, she was still sitting. She didn't sleep, didn't eat. She opened Matthew's school yearbook, cross-referenced the drawings she saw in that underground chamber, matched the faces. Every child was accounted for, but one name had a star next to it, a mark. Matthew Gray, the only one who didn't seem completely changed. He fought it. He resisted longer. Maybe still was. Maybe he hadn't been fully consumed yet. She didn't know how she knew it, but she felt it. He was trying to reach her. And if she didn't go back, if she didn't do something, he'd be gone forever. She had one more card to play. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Detective Mendez," the voice on the other end answered. "Luis," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's Eleanor Gray." A pause. Then, "Eleanor? It's been years." "I found something." "No, I found them." Silence. "You're serious?" "I need you to meet me at Willow Creek tonight. Bring whatever you can, I have proof." "What kind of proof?" She looked at the note again, at the photos, the drawings, the scrape marks on her hands. She stared into the void of her son's eyes in a school photo that should have never been his last. And she said, "The kind that bleeds." Luis Mendez hadn't thought about Willow Creek Elementary in over a decade. He'd tried not to. Back. When it first happened, he was a fresh-faced beat cop with too much optimism and not enough experience. The day that classroom sealed itself and 23 people disappeared, that optimism died fast. The case broke him in a way nothing else ever had. Nothing made sense. There were no signs of struggle, no escape routes, no bodies. Just absence. Cold, unexplainable absence. He transferred departments 6 years later, moved states, tried to outrun it. But here he was, 25 years later, headlights illuminating the same overgrown gates, the same cursed school, because one voice, Eleanor's voice, shook something in him. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. She sounded like a woman who had finally seen what she feared all along, and somehow believed it. He pulled up beside her car near the edge of the woods behind the school. She was already there, standing under a tree in a thick raincoat, her hands stuffed in her pockets. The wind whipped her hair around her face, but she didn't flinch. "Eleanor," he said, stepping out and shutting his door softly. "You look like hell." "Matches how I feel," she said without humor. He walked closer. She handed him a folder. Photos, copies of the note, and one picture that made him stop breathing for a second, the chalk symbol. "I've seen this before," he murmured. "You remember it?" "Yeah. On the chalkboard in 3B, right before they wiped everything. Thought it was a drawing, a doodle." "No," she said. "It's not just a symbol. It's a mark. A trap door." Luis looked at her, eyebrows raised. "A what now?" She didn't blink. "You don't have to believe me." But I went. There's a door in the supply room that leads into something under the school, something not built by the district, I promise you." He studied her face. "And what's down there?" She hesitated, then said it. "The children. Still there. But they're different. And the thing that took them, it's wearing a teacher's face." Luis blinked hard. "Jesus, you know how this sounds, right?" "I don't care how it sounds," she snapped. "I'm not asking you to put it in a report. I'm asking you to come with me, just once. I'll take you there. If I'm wrong, fine, walk away. But if I'm not, if I'm right, we don't have much time." He hesitated for a long moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out his holstered pistol. "Let's go." They slipped through the break in the fence just as the last light faded from the sky. The school loomed ahead, skeletal and waiting. Rain ticked against the broken windows like tapping fingers. Luis moved like a cop again. Quiet steps, eyes scanning, muscles tense. But even he couldn't hide his discomfort as they entered through the boiler room window. "This place feels wrong," he muttered. "Wait. Until you hear it breathe," Eleanor said grimly. She led him through the hallway, which had twisted since she last saw it. Doors had changed. Some lockers were new, impossibly new, like they belonged in a school still in use. And as they passed room 3B, she stopped. "Here," she whispered. Luis raised his gun. She opened the supply closet and the tunnel was still there. Gaping, dark, breathing out faint warmth like the sigh of something asleep beneath the earth. Luis exhaled. "You weren't kidding." "Still want to go?" He didn't answer, just nodded and ducked inside. The tunnel felt even smaller now, like it had narrowed to resist them. Eleanor felt every brick scrape her spine, every inch, resisting her forward motion. The whispers came sooner this time, soft hisses, pieces of phrases. "He's back. Don't wake it. Eyes shut, eyes shut." Luis froze once, looked at her. "Who the hell is whispering?" "They are," she said. "Who's they?" "You'll see." They emerged into the underground room, and even Luis, who had seen corpses, blood, monsters of the humankind, let out a sharp gasp. The toys, the bags, the red glowing mark, and the children, all there, all standing silently. And the thing that wore Mr. Halloway's face stood waiting. It looked up. "Well," it said, amused. "You brought a guest." Luis raised the gun. "Move, away, from the kids." The thing chuckled. "Oh, detective, you think that's going to stop me?" "You'd be surprised." "No, you'd be," it replied, and blinked. In that moment, the lights in the chamber vanished. The flashlight in Eleanor's hand burst in a flicker of sparks. They were thrown into utter blackness. Luis fired once, twice. The blasts lit the space with momentary flashes. What they revealed was worse than darkness. The creature was no longer wearing a human shape. It stood stretched and twitching, a mass of sinew and shadows, its form roiling like something trying to remember what skin felt like. Then came the sound, a sharp, high-pitched wail like dozens of children screaming at once. Eleanor fell to her knees, clutching her ears. Luis stumbled backward, hand still on his weapon, but his aim wild now. Then a voice cut through the scream, small, strained, from the back of the room. "Mom!" Eleanor's head snapped up. "Matthew!" He stepped forward from the crowd, the only one who looked almost normal. Pale, yes. Tired. His eyes, sunken but not hollow. Not yet. She stood shakily. "Baby, oh my God, Matthew!" His face crumpled. "I tried to warn them. I didn't know how. I wrote it. I thought someone would read it before—" "I did," she said, crying. "I found it. I found you." But behind him, the thing reformed, regrew that waxy face, those soulless eyes. "No," it hissed. "He is mine." And suddenly the room was alive with motion. Children moved like shadows, converging, not to attack, but to shield. They stood in a circle around Eleanor and Matthew, their broken limbs folding protectively inward, their eyes dimming with effort. The creature roared, trying to breach the circle, but it couldn't. Luis reached for Eleanor, pulling her, and Matthew toward the tunnel. "We have to go now." They ran, Matthew between them. The tunnel twisted violently behind them, the walls cracking, groaning, pulsing with fury. Something howled at their backs. Wind, screams, memory itself trying to claw them back. They burst into the boiler room, coughing, scraped, exhausted, and then the door slammed shut behind them. All was still. For now. The moment the door slammed behind them, the air shifted. Gone was the whispering, the pulsing hum of whatever nightmare lived beneath Willow Creek. What remained was silence, thick and stunned, like even the school itself was trying to understand what had just happened. Eleanor collapsed against the wall, panting. Her heart thudded in her chest like it was trying to dig its way out. Luis leaned forward, hands on his knees, chest heaving with every breath. His gun hung limp at his side now, forgotten in the haze of what they'd just seen. But it was Matthew who brought her back. He was standing in the middle of the boiler room, small hands shaking, his eyes scanning everything as if none of it made sense. Is it real?" he asked. voice rough with disuse. Eleanor was on him in an instant, pulling him close, clutching him so tightly that her arms ached. "You're real," she whispered. "That's all I care about." "You're real." His body trembled against hers. "It felt like a dream," he said. "Every day the same, that room, that thing. Sometimes it wore faces I didn't recognize. Sometimes it made us forget who we were. But I held on. I held on. I know, baby. I know you did. I saw your note. That's how I found you." Louise stepped back, still catching his breath, watching them both with wide eyes. He hasn't aged," Eleanor nodded slowly. "Time works differently down there. It feeds on moments, holds them." Matthew turned to Louise. "You were a policeman." Louise blinked. "That's right, you remember me. You gave me a sticker once," he said. "Said I was brave." Louise swallowed hard. "You were. You still are." The boy smiled, faintly, then flinched. The shadows in the corners of the boiler room quivered. Louise raised his gun again. "What the hell?" A voice slid through the cracks like smoke. "You think this ends with one?" Eleanor stood, her arms still around Matthew. "What do you mean?" The voice didn't come from the tunnel anymore. It came from everywhere. "You took one back, so I will take one more." A light flickered above them, then another. The overheads buzzed to life for the first time in decades, but the light they cast wasn't white. It was orange, sickly, flickering like fire. Luis moved to the door. It wouldn't open. He slammed against it with his shoulder. "It's locked. What the—" A soft giggle echoed from the hall beyond. Then footsteps. Eleanor felt a chill crawl down her spine. Matthew clutched her tighter. "It's following us." "No," Luis muttered. "It's already here." The lights blew out one by one. Darkness returned in pulses. And then they heard it, crying, from the hallway. A child's cry, but not Matthew. Different, feminine. "Help, please, I'm lost." Luis looked toward the door, hand hovering at the knob. "No," Eleanor said quickly. "It's not real." He hesitated. "It sounds real." "She sounded real too," she snapped, until she grew 3 arms and a smile that split to her ears. The crying stopped. Then a whisper, colder than death. "She remembers me." Eleanor's legs buckled. She did. That voice. All those years ago, before the classroom disappeared, before everything went silent, she had walked past that door during lunch and heard a little girl humming a tune she hadn't heard since. Now it was humming again. Luis grabbed a wrench from a rusted toolbox nearby. "We need to move, now. Get to the front exit." They moved in a huddle. Eleanor holding Matthew's hand, Luis covering their back, flashlight flickering just enough to show them the path ahead. But the school was not the same anymore. The halls were longer. The tiles beneath their feet changed color and texture. One moment linoleum, the next moment slick like wet stone. Shadows moved along the ceiling, shapes that didn't match the 3 of them. They passed room 3B again. This time the door was wide open. The light from inside flickered like candlelight. Matthew stopped, eyes fixed. "She's still in there," he whispered. Eleanor turned. "Who?" "Anna." Luis furrowed his brow. "The girl who warned you." He nodded. "She helped me stay sane. She remembered things like me. She drew pictures of the outside world so we wouldn't forget. The others, they faded. She didn't." "We can't go back in there," Eleanor said, panic rising. "We barely made it out." But Matthew didn't move. "She's calling me." Luis stepped forward. "We can't split up, not now. You said yourself it mimics voices, remember?" Matthew looked up at him, then at his mother. Then his eyes widened in horror. "Behind you." Luis turned and saw himself, standing in the hallway, smiling. Eleanor screamed. The second Luis cocked his head, mirroring the real one like a sick reflection in a shattered mirror. "I always wondered what I'd look like dead," the real Luis muttered, raising his gun. The creature lunged, he fired. The thing burst into ash mid-air, dissolving into hundreds of thin, paper-like scraps that fluttered to the floor. Then, they moved again, faster now. Doors slammed open and shut along the hallway as they ran, each echo sounding more like a scream than the last. The windows at the end of the corridor shimmered like heat mirages, distorting their view of the world outside. And then, finally, they reached the front doors. Locked. Of course they were. But Eleanor wasn't the same woman who had first stepped inside. She kicked the glass once, twice, the third time it shattered. They burst out into the cold night air like survivors escaping a burning building. Grass, wind, rain, real. Louise pulled them all away from the school's entrance, heart hammering like a war drum. They stood in the dark, drenched, shivering. And then the building let out a low groan. The doors behind them slowly closed of their own accord. No wind, no hands, just closed. Louise holstered his weapon. What now? Eleanor looked at her son. He was watching the building. His eyes not afraid anymore, but determined. He turned to her and whispered, "We have to go back." She blinked. "Matthew, what are you talking about? You're safe. We got you out." "I'm not the only one," he said. "Anna's in there, and so are the rest, and they can still be saved." Eleanor's heart broke. She had her son back, and now he wanted to go back inside hell. "No," she said fiercely. "You don't go back in, ever again." But she stayed, to protect me. I owe her. Louise looked between them, his expression grim. "That thing, it's not finished. It's following us. It doesn't care about boundaries. If we don't stop it—" Matthew nodded, then said one thing that chilled them both. "You thought it was about this school." He turned to face them fully. "It's not. It never was." The wind picked up around them, howling like a warning. The grass swayed unnaturally, bending in one direction then the other, as if pulled by invisible hands. Eleanor's arms were still wrapped protectively around Matthew, her body stiff and cold, soaked to the bone. She stared at her son. "What? Do you mean it's not about the school?" Matthew looked older in that moment, not in his face, and he still had the smooth skin of a child, but in his eyes. Something had been watching from behind them for too long, something that had seen too much. "It chose the school," he said, "because of what it is. But it could have been anywhere. It's not tied to the walls. It's tied to belief." Louise stepped forward, jaw tight. "Belief in what?" "In it," Matthew whispered. "In what it pretends to be. The more we believe, the stronger it becomes. And kids, we believe everything." Eleanor felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. "So what, you're saying it fed off you?" "It fed off all of us," Matthew replied. "Our fear, our memories, our hope. It wears your face, your voice, your kindness, until we trust it. Then it takes something, a little more each time." Louise looked back toward the school. "So if it's not trapped there anymore—" "It never was," Matthew said. The realization hit Eleanor like a punch. "That's why you said we have to go back." Matthew nodded slowly. "We need to find Anna. She knows more. She was awake longer than anyone. She saw it change before I did." "No," Eleanor said again, firmer now. "You barely made it out. I'm not sending you back into that place." "But if we don't, we'll find another way," she interrupted. "You're not going back." Louise stepped between them. "Let's think this through. If that thing has feeding on belief, it doesn't need a building. It just needs people. If it leaves that school, or worse, if it already has, it could do this again. Anywhere. To anyone." Eleanor stared at him. "You think it's going to start over? Somewhere else?" "I think," Louise said, "it already has." They drove in silence. Louise led the way, taking the back roads out of Willow Creek. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and clouds hung heavy in the sky. Eleanor held Matthew's hand the entire time, afraid that if she let go he'd vanish again. He sat quietly, eyes on the window, lips pressed into a hard line. After 20 minutes, Louise pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place open late only because it hadn't been told to close. The sign above the door blinked with a dying buzz. Maddie's. Inside it was almost empty. Just a cook, a bored waitress, and a young girl sitting alone in a booth near the back. Her hair was long, dark, tied with a red ribbon. She looked maybe 10 or 11. A coloring book sat in front of her. Eleanor didn't notice her at first, until Matthew stopped in the doorway. "Her?" he said. Eleanor followed his gaze. Who? The girl. She's one of us. From the classroom. Eleanor squinted. That's not possible. We brought you out. You were the only one. She wasn't with us when we escaped, he whispered. But she's not new. That's Lily Carter. She vanished with us. I remember her. Louise walked over to the booth. Hey there, sweetheart. You here with someone? The girl didn't look up. She was shading in a tree with a red crayon. I'm waiting, she said softly. For who? She stopped coloring, looked up, smiled. Mr. Halloway. Eleanor felt every hair on her body rise. Louise stepped back. Jesus! Matthew walked closer, his voice low. Lily. The girl turned her head slowly. And her eyes. Hollow, just like the others. But she wasn't gone. Not yet. He could tell. There was still something human behind the fog. You came back, she whispered. I had to, Matthew said. We're trying to stop it. She nodded once. You're too late. Louise gritted his teeth. We dragged your demon out of the floorboards already. That thing's not leaving here. Lily blinked. You think that was all of it? The silence that followed was thick, enough to choke on. Matthew whispered, It can split. She nodded. It's in more than one place now, she said. It multiplied. The longer it was inside the school, the more it learned. It doesn't need to stay in one body anymore. It just needs pieces of us. Eleanor turned to Louise, panic rising. We thought we stopped it. We barely scratched the surface. Then Lily began to hum. A soft, sad tune. The same one Eleanor had heard in the school. That cursed melody. The waitress behind the counter turned, her eyes blank. Another voice joined the hum. The cook. Then a man from the back booth, one Eleanor hadn't noticed when they walked. And his smile was crooked, his eyes too wide. Matthew whispered, It's here. All around them, the people in the diner began humming in unison. Low, slow, beautiful and wrong. Eleanor grabbed Matthew's hand. Louise, we run. Now. He didn't argue. They bolted for the door, just as the lights began to flicker. Glass shattered behind them, and the hum turned into a roar. Not a scream, not exactly, but a sound like something waking up inside them. As they dove into the car, Eleanor looked back. Lily was standing in the doorway, smiling, waving, and then she mouthed something. It's already inside. Eleanor drove like she was being chased by fire. The rain blurred the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. Streetlights flickered above like dying stars, casting erratic shadows across the road. Every time they passed a pedestrian, Eleanor's heart clenched, afraid she'd see that hollow, waxen face staring back through the window. Matthew sat curled in the back seat, knees to his chest, watching everything too closely for a boy his age. He was silent now, not in fear, but focus. He was thinking, planning. Louise rode shotgun, gun resting loosely on his thigh, his other hand gripping the dash. That little girl, he said finally. She knew about everything. She never left, Eleanor replied, her voice brittle. She's part of it now, like the others. But she wasn't trying to stop us. She warned us. Why? Matthew leaned forward from the back seat. Because it's using us as mirrors. Louise turned. What? The more people it copies, the more it learns to act like them, like us. That's why it didn't kill Lily or me. We remembered too much. We fought it. It couldn't fully take us. It needs some of us alive to keep learning, growing. Louise shook his head slowly. So it's evolving. Matthew nodded. And now it's spreading, quietly, carefully, like a virus, but not through air, through belief, through memory, through attention. Eleanor's grip on the steering wheel tightened until her knuckles turned white. Like an idea that kills. Matthew didn't respond. He just stared out the window at the fog that had begun to roll across the road. Where do we go now? Eleanor asked, voice cracking. Louise hesitated. We need proof. Something that shows the public what's happening. Something undeniable. They won't believe us, she said. They didn't before. They will if we don't give them a choice. Eleanor pulled into the back lot of an abandoned hardware store near the town's edge. She shut off the headlights and killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Luis turned in his seat. We can't outrun this, and we can't shoot our way through it. But if it spreads through belief, then maybe we can starve it. Matthew perked up. What do you mean? I mean we go public. Everywhere. Online. National news. Expose the whole damn thing, not with some crazy ghost story, no, with hard evidence, photos, video, names, locations. Eleanor looked doubtful. Won't that just make people more afraid? Feed it? Not if we change the narrative, Luis said. Not if we make people disbelieve. If it feeds on fear and mystery, we kill it with logic. Make it ridiculous. Turn it into a joke. Matthew's brow furrowed. You want to meme it to death? Luis cracked a humorless grin. Stranger things have happened. Eleanor wanted to argue. It sounded insane. Reckless. But at this point, sanity hadn't done them any favors, she nodded. Okay, what do we need? Power, internet, access to the police database, and someone willing to put their badge on the line. Matthew said quietly, We'll need bait too. Eleanor turned to him, horrified. Absolutely not. But he held her gaze. It's following me, he said. It always has been. That makes me a beacon. We can use that. Lure it somewhere. Trap it. You said it feeds on belief. Let's feed it a lie so big it chokes. Eleanor shook her head. You don't understand. If you go back in... I'm not the scared little boy anymore, he said firmly. And I'm not going back alone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made her gasp. The paper. The note. The same one she had found in the attic, Matthew's last message before the disappearance. But it was glowing now. Faintly. Like something inside it had awakened. Louise stared. What the hell is that? I wrote it to warn them, Matthew said softly. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's a key. Eleanor touched it gently. The glow pulsed beneath her fingers like a heartbeat. We bring it back to the school, Matthew said. We bring all of it back, the symbol, the drawings, the fear, the lie. Louise nodded. And we record everything. If this thing is going to wear our stories, then we turn those stories into weapons. They didn't wait until morning. They didn't trust they'd have one. By the time they returned to Willow Creek Elementary, the moon was high and sharp in the sky, casting cold light over the crumbling building. Fog pooled along the ground like spilled breath. The gates were still open. Or maybe again. Eleanor parked in the same place. They stepped out together, the wind cold against their backs. Matthew carried the note in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Louise held the camcorder. Real tape. No digital glitches for the thing to manipulate. No edits. Eleanor had her son's hand in one and the crowbar in the other. The building welcomed them this time. The door was ajar. And the hum began almost instantly. Softer now, more seductive, as if it knew they'd come willingly. Louise started filming. They retraced their steps down the hall. The walls were the same, but wrong. The cracks looked like veins now. The floors seemed to pulse beneath their feet. They stopped outside room 3B. It was open. Inside, the symbol was waiting. But this time it was larger. Almost the size of the whole back wall, glowing a sickly red-orange. The children's drawings were plastered across the room like wallpaper, covering the desks, the floor, the ceiling. Eyes everywhere. And in the center stood the creature, no longer pretending. It had discarded Mr. Halloway's face. It was just it now. A mass of dark, glistening skin, arms that branched like roots, a face made of pieces, fragments. One human eye, one hollow socket, a mouth stitched with whispers. You returned, it said. Matthew stepped forward. We brought you a gift. The creature tilted its head. Louise held up the camcorder. Smile. Then Matthew held out the glowing note. The creature shrieked, not in pain, but rage. You dare use the lie as truth? Matthew's voice was steady. We turned your lie into a story. Now we're telling ours, and you're not the one writing the ending. The note began to burn in his hand, but it didn't consume, it illuminated. The walls lit up, and the drawings began to move. The children in them blinked. The symbol trembled. The creature screamed. Louise kept the camera rolling. The creature thrashed. Its body surged in all directions, limbs flailing, melting and reshaping like shadows trying to remember how to be flesh. The walls of room 3B quaked with every pulse of light coming from the note in Matthew's hand. No longer a scrap of paper, but a beacon of something ancient and buried. Not magic, not science, but something even older. Truth. Eleanor watched, in stunned horror, as the drawings on the walls began to shimmer. The stick figures, once frozen depictions of fear and doom, now moved. Slowly, their arms reaching for each other, their mouths opening as if they were finally breathing again. One by one they stepped off the page. Children. Real children. Their feet touched the floor, and with each one that crossed back into the world, the creature shrieked louder. "No!" It roared, voice echoing like 100 voices screaming through one rotting throat. "They are mine, they chose me." "They were children," Eleanor shouted, stepping forward now. "They didn't choose anything. You fed on their—" Fear twisted their memories into cages. She swung the crowbar hard, smashing the edge of the symbol on the wall. A crack bloomed across it, and the room howled like it had been stabbed. Luis caught it all on tape. His hands were steady, sweat dripping down his brow, but he never looked away from the lens. "Keep going," he muttered. "Let them see this, all of it." More children emerged. Anna was next. Her small, trembling form stepped into the center of the room, her eyes wide, her lips moving, but no words escaping. Matthew ran to her. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. Anna's eyes filled with tears. "You remembered." "I always did." Eleanor turned to the remaining drawings, just a few more, and began ripping them down with her bare hands, shouting the names of each child as she did. "Caleb Reed, Maya Lawson, Jordan Phillips, come home." And they did. Their forms stumbled out of the walls like prisoners finally stepping into the sun. But not all of them made it. The last few, their drawings were blank, smudged, faded. The creature absorbed their shapes, pulsing larger. "They forgot," it hissed, "and they are mine." Luis stepped forward, camcorder still in hand. "Then choke on them." He shoved the camera forward into the creature's chest. The screen blinked, the footage looped. Eleanor, Matthew, the drawings, the lie, the truth. The creature reeled. Light exploded across the room like a bomb of memory, burning away. The walls, the ceiling, the air itself. Eleanor fell to her knees and threw her arms around Matthew and Anna, pulling them down. The children screamed, not in fear, in release. And then, for the first time in 25 years, silence. Real silence. Not the heavy, choking kind that sat on your chest like a weight, but the kind that comes after something is finally over. The walls of room 3B were gone. The floor cracked open, revealing dirt and root beneath. The symbol was shattered, its power extinguished. The creature was gone. Only its scent remained, the bitter odor of things that should never have. Existed. Eleanor looked around. The children were sitting, blinking, breathing. Matthew helped Anna to her feet, then helped the others, one by one, quietly, gently. Luis stood, face pale, arms shaking, but the tape was still rolling, and he smiled. We got it. The next, 48 hours moved in a blur. Luis leaked the footage to every contact he had, ex-journalists, fringe investigators, even YouTube conspiracy theorists. Within hours it hit social media. Millions watched, most mocked, some denied, but a few listened, and that was enough. The creature's power began to fray in real time. Whispers about other vanishings across the country were suddenly remembered, but without fear, without belief. Some stories were laughed off, others were turned into jokes. A meme of Mr. Holloway's melting face went viral with the caption, "When your substitute teacher is actually a soul-eating demon but still gives you homework." And the thing, starved. You could feel it. Every hour the world felt lighter. The children recovered slowly, their memories fragile but intact. Most were taken into care. Their families long gone, time having swallowed everything except names on faded flyers. Matthew stayed with Eleanor, and every night he sat by her, bed and told her what he remembered, the days, the fear, the tricks, the thing that had whispered to them, "The world has forgotten you, but I never will." And how that lie almost became the truth, until she remembered, until she came back. 3 weeks later, The school was demolished. No one protested. No one even showed up to watch, except Eleanor, Matthew, Louise, and the 21 other children. They stood at the edge of the grass as the machines tore down the walls that had held so many nightmares, and underneath the rubble, buried deep in the foundation, they found something. A second note, older, torn, written in a shaky, desperate hand, not a child's, an adult's. Louise read it aloud. If anyone finds this, we were wrong to build here. The soil remembers. It's not the land that's cursed. It's the belief. Burn the blueprints, seal the basement, and never, ever teach the children its name. There was no signature, just a final word, scribbled and underlined again and again. Forget. Eleanor looked at Matthew. He looked back. I won't, she said. Neither will I, he replied. Louise nodded once. But we'll make sure no one else has to. 1 year later, Matthew sat alone in a library, flipping through an old sketchbook. His fingers stopped on a blank page. He stared at it. Then, slowly, he drew a circle, then a triangle, then an eye, just as a test, just to see. He stared. Nothing happened. No whispers, no movement, no humming. He smiled, closed the book, and walked out into the sunlight.